Alright. The next Chaos God faction we'll be looking at is Nurgle. Also known as the Plague Lord, is the Chaos God of disease, decay, death, and degradation. I feel like Skrulk would have liked this guy. But then again, he serves the Horned Rat. But anyways. He is perhaps the oldest of his brother gods, for the process of decay began with life. Yet Nurgle is also the personification of rebirth. After all, atrophy is simply one part of life's cycle, without which nothing new can grow. And so those who embrace Nurgle accept their own doom with good humor. Disfigured by disease and mutation, they are keen to spread grandfather's blessings to the poor souls that wander through life unafflicted. As plagues spread, so too does Nurgle's power and status amongst his brothers. He waxes and wanes, weakest when bellies are full, and mortals are healthy, but quickly rising to absolute ascendancy, when his followers unleash the most lethal of diseases. Plagues. Concoct and spread plagues across the world or afflict your own assets. Kind of reminds me of the change they made to Skrulk in Warhammer 2, where before the plagues actually used to hurt him and his faction. Later on they realized, wait, that doesn't make sense. He's the plague guy, so why would that hurt him? It actually should make him stronger and help benefit him. And they made a change where it did. They actually had it where spreading plagues would actually aid his settlements and his armies. And it seems like they're going to go that route here with Nurgle as well, which makes complete and total sense. Or, let me say again, makes total sense or complete sense. Yeah, you guys know what I'm saying. Cyclical buildings. Settlements will grow over time and will then wither and die out. That seems so odd and interesting. I'm so curious how that's going to work.
That disease weaver.
So, once again, one lord for Nurgle at launch. Kugath, Plaguefather of the Poxmakers of Nurgle. Once again, just showing you the roster for this specific faction is actually pretty small. When it comes to, you got your lords here, including, of course, the big one, Kugath, Plaguefather, a few heroes, a few infantry, Nurglings. They have poison attacks, and watching these guys is kind of amazing. It's like, whoa. Exalted Plague Bearers. And you've got various different monsters and beasts, rot flies. Ugh. But then again, and gross is going to be a common thing here with Nurgle, as you can imagine. So anyways, as far as what lore he uses, I'm sure, the lore of Nurgle, no doubt. I'm sure that's no doubt the lore you're going to be using here. Like Miasma of Pestilence, the Curse of the Leper, the Blight Boil, the Fleshy Abundance, the Rancid Visitations, and the Stream of Corruption. Yeah, a lot of that kind of stuff. So if you enjoy doing that with the Skaven and Skrulk, you'll probably like this. But there's different things about this I've heard actually make playing Kugath kind of difficult. But anyways, Kugath Plaguefather, the Rotting Poxmaker, is one of the most favored of Nurgle's chosen. Fascinated by the breeding of new contagions, he frequently forays into the mortal realms to test fresh creations on the battlefield, driven by a desire to concoct the perfect plague capable of infecting even the gods themselves. So he's like right dab in the middle here. Huh. Interesting starting position for him. That I believe also that's where like his live, and he's like near the Chaos Space, which makes sense. Not too far from where Scarbrand is, I believe. So his faction effects is plus 10 growth, and minus 30%, 35% recruitment cost for Nurgling units, and plus 40% recruitment health for Nurgling units. So they're going to be pretty strong, and remember they have poison attacks built in. His Lord effects are Infection cost minus 50%, Nurgle Corruption plus 2, and a chance of a plague spreading plus 15%. Yeah. Again, the plague thing was something I got introduced to with Skrulk in Warhammer 2, so I'm glad to see that's here for Nurgle's forces. Decay and rot. Nurgle is the god of plagues and poxes, and while the countless mortals suffer in misery, he believes to have bestowed them all with great gifts. Nurgle's most eager apprentice is the voted brewmaster, Kugath Plaguefather. The Plaguefather has always preferred lurking in the dark places of the mortal world, so it is no surprise that he was far from the realm of chaos when Ursun's roar caused the maelstrom. But there is a way to lure him back there. The promise of the ultimate specimen upon which to experiment. For a time, he was well hidden, even from the Tome of Fate's pages, and I wandered needlessly until I picked up his noxious trail, and it led me underground. I must make my offer quickly, before I succumb.
The gallows tree, dwelling of Kugath, father of plagues. There is no greater brewmaster of phage and pox than he. To describe the squalor of the fetid sewer is impossible. I risked my very flesh to tread it. Kugath thought me but another specimen for his grotesque experiments. Before the rot consumed me, I offered something finer. Belagor has imprisoned the god-bear of Kislev.
Oh, how delightful. If Belagor has struck, there'll be plenty of carrion for me.
Ursun himself lies dying, fatally wounded in the Forge of Souls.
A dying god. The finest corpse from which to brew a plague.
A god-pox, mighty Kugath.
A god pox. You tempt me, old man. But I cannot reach the Forge of Souls. The maelstrom prevents us.
I can reach it and guide you to the dying bear.
And why would you do this, little healthy mortal?
For a single drop of Ursun's blood. That is my fate.
Blood for you, the body for me.
Our goal is to harvest the god bear's corpse. The perfect specimen to create the most unholy of plagues, the god pox.
I love the murk, but this time I require clarity. Infected you'll be if you do not allow me to see.
Our travels from the gallows tree to the sunken sewers place us much closer to mortal lands. All the better for you to unleash your brews and ensure we are powerful enough to breach the realm of chaos when the time comes. Ogres encroach on our land and squat in Glutport, our access point to the frozen sea. Get rid of them. We must be wary of leaving our eastern flank exposed even as we look south. For hated dwarfs recolonize Karak Dum, a beachhead in the Chaos Wastes they have no intention of losing. And southwards, just across the sea, are tribes of mortals, followers of the dark gods, easy to corrupt and make puppets of, or even vanquish. Food for your plague bearers. But it is through Black Blood Pass where frail Kislev lies supine and ready for infection. You shall bring misery upon its people before defiling their god. I can see you are eager to begin, feculent brewmaster. So let us conquer in Grandfather's name.
Interesting that we've already noticed that they referred to Khorne as Skarbrand's father, whereas here they referred to Nurgle as the grandfather, but the game did say that he is considered the oldest of the 4 Chaos Gods, so I guess at that point it's like, yep, Nurgle's the grandfather of us all. The servants of Nurgle will automatically wage war, yeah, just like the others. Nurglish factions can create plagues with customized effects and spread them to their unfortunate enemies. Once constructed, Nurglish buildings organically grow to their full potency before shedding their parts, returning to their initial state, and starting the cycle anew. The growth rate in Nurgle-controlled provinces is tied to the local level of Nurgle corruption. Nurglish factions participate in the Great Game, vying with other followers of Chaos to spread the most corruption. Okay. So, I'm so curious about this. See, this is the weird, interesting thing about these buildings here. You see this? So we can be able to select this building here, and then I think it goes to either of these, or we choose either of these after a certain amount of turns? It's so interesting and odd, and then apparently it's going to die and we have to start it again. I can understand why some people would be consider this difficult and get a little frustrated by this, because this seems like I get what they're going for with the theme here, but oh boy, that's going to be interesting to deal with and manage here. Infections. In order to devise plagues, infections must be gathered. These can be harvested from buildings and captives, along with spreading the plagues themselves. Then we have the Plague Cauldron. Remember this? This looks familiar, doesn't it? I remember a couple of other factions from Warhammer 2 that had this kind of similar thing where it was like a brew pot and you would brew things. So we've got the Plague Pox, and then an available symptom slot, which can be some of these other things here. So we've got Plague Pox, which is plus 5 infections when plague is spread, Nurgle corruption. We got Nurgle corruption here, but on non-Nurgle... Okay, this is on Nurgle settlements, and this is on non-Nurgle settlements, which reduces their... okay, so we give them more attrition and reduce their casualty replenishment. Non-Nurgle enemies only suffer attrition, camping movement range reduced. And then we got some other things here that we can be able to use infections to acquire here, like bleeding ears, pestilence, limb blight, weeping eyes, brain fog. So bleeding ears will give us plus 6 control, and non-Nurgle summons minus 6 control recipes. So we've got Crumbling Argue, Black Plague, the Black Plague, with plague duration plus 5 turns. A lot of interesting things here. I can definitely see why this is kind of an interesting mechanic, but it's going to take some time to get used to. We, of course, have Unholy Manifestations, just like with the other ones here. We have Pestilent Growth right there. We also have Blessing of Nurgle, Exponential Growth. Okay. Interesting. As far as technology... So it looks like this does not require skulls like the Khorne one did, and research rate is up 100%. Huh. So it looks like it just takes time. There's no cost, it looks like. We just have to wait for time, and then we can be able to go ahead and move along. 7 is the number of the Plague Lord. 7 are the ways which Nurgle infects mortals and immortal alike with contagions. Invoke his methods and become the Blessed Carrier. All the way to over here. Interesting. So I've heard that this can be a rather difficult campaign. So let's see what happens when we fight and what the choices we get. Also, he's on his own vehicle, you can see here. Kugath is he's kind of taking gold tooths method, which is I'm so big I'm just going to have this thing carry me around the whole time. It looks like it's just a big throne overflowing with buckets of like acid and plague and like just... So he starts off, Kugath starts off with, he's a spellcaster, by the way. He's a wizard and causes terror. Of course he does. Why wouldn't that face cause terror? He has Plague Bearers of Nurgle. He has Nurglings. He has Plague Toads, Chaos Furies, and Plague Drones of Nurgle. So, when we win a fight, we can either get more infections, replenishment, or favor. More infections. I also love that Kugath, he seemed like the type of character that I would enjoy, because rather than, who are you, you'll die, he saw the advisor and he was like, oh, well, hello there, what do you want to talk about? And he was like, oh, Urson. He's like, ooh, how wonderful. So lovely to hear about Urson. He seemed like the kind of character who was just like, I'm gonna have some fun with you and play with you. He came across like a very fun type of character. That was my impression, anyway. So, that's Kugath Plaguefather of Nurgle. I'm curious to see who else they're going to add. Obviously, because of my lack of knowledge about the characters and the lore, I have no idea who else exists. If anyone knows, feel free to comment on who you think they'll add to the Nurgle faction later on as DLC. When we return, we'll be probably looking at either Sinch or Slanesh. Stay tuned.